the frozen hell. By December of 1914, the Great War was supposed to have been over. The boys, they were told, would be home for Christmas. Instead, they were trapped in a frozen, waterlogged hell, a scar of mud and misery stretching from the Swiss border to the North Sea. This was the Western Front, a landscape of shattered trees and skeletal wires, where life was measured in inches gained and friends lost. The air, thick with the stench of mud, cordite, and decay, was a constant reminder of the monstrous machine that devoured youth. These were not yet the jaded veterans of the Somme or Verdun. They were still just boys, plucked from farms in Saxony and factories in Liverpool, from offices in London and universities in Bavaria. They were taught to see the man across the 100 yards of cratered earth, no man's land, not as a person, but as a target. The Hun, the Tommy, an abstract concept to be hated and killed. But as the first Christmas of the war approached, a strange, unspoken question hung in the freezing air. Could humanity survive in a place designed to extinguish it? A carol in the trenches. It began not with an order or a treaty, but with a sound. A single, fragile sound that defied the logic of the battlefield. On Christmas Eve, from the German trenches opposite the British lines near Ypres, Belgium, came the melody of Stille Nacht, Silent Night. At first, the British soldiers were suspicious. Was it a trick? A cruel deception to lure them into the open? But then, another voice joined, and another. The harmony drifted across the frozen mud, a ghostly, beautiful sound in a place of utter ugliness. Emboldened, a British unit responded with their own carol, the First Noel. For a moment, the war was a concert. Shouted greetings in broken English and German replaced the crack of rifles. "Hello, Tommy. Hello, Fritz." Then, a truly astonishing sight. Small Christmas trees, their candles flickering like defiant stars, began to appear along the parapets of the German trenches. It was an invitation, an offering of peace in a time of war. And slowly, cautiously, brave men on both sides began to climb out of the earth, walking into the open, not with rifles raised, but with hands outstretched. The kickoff of humanity. In the spectral gray light of Christmas Day, no man's land underwent a resurrection. The killing field, scarred by craters and entangled in the rusted intestines of barbed wire, was transformed. It became a bizarre, impromptu village green, a neutral ground sanctified not by treaty, but by a shared, unspoken yearning for peace. Men who had been trained to see each other as monstrous caricatures now saw the truth. The enemy had a face, a smile, a homesickness that mirrored their own. They gathered in small, cautious groups, their breath misting in the frigid air. The first exchanges were simple, almost childlike. A button from a British tunic was traded for a prized German belt buckle. A tin of Makanoki stew was swapped for a handful of rich, dark German cigars. They were rebuilding a common world with the small trinkets they had in their pockets. They showed each other dog-eared photographs of wives, children, and sweethearts left behind, finding a universal language in the ache of love and longing. A young Bavarian pointed to a photo of his rosy-cheeked daughter, and an English corporal, his own daughter's face flashing in his mind, could only nod in solemn, perfect understanding. But the defining moment, the incredible act that would elevate this truce from a simple curiosity to an immortal legend, erupted from the most ordinary of objects. A football. From where did it come? The answer is lost to the fog of war, buried in 1,000 conflicting memories. A letter home from a private in the London Rifle Brigade claims a friend received a proper leather ball as a Christmas gift and, in a moment of pure inspiration, kicked it out of the trench. Other accounts, perhaps more romantic, speak of a makeshift sphere hastily fashioned from bundled rags and tied with string. Some even insist it was nothing more than an empty bully beef tin, its metallic clatter echoing across the silent battlefield. In the end, the object itself was irrelevant. What mattered was the primal, unifying instinct it unleashed. A British soldier, perhaps a lad from Manchester who lived for Saturday afternoons at the stadium, booted it high into the air. It spun against the gray sky and landed in the muddy space between the lines. Without a word, a young Saxon boy, maybe a farmhand who chased pigs across a field, trapped it expertly with his worn boot and, with a grin, chipped it back. The invitation was made. The challenge was accepted. In an instant, the war was forgotten. Jackets and greatcoats were thrown down in muddy piles to serve as goalposts. The frozen, crater-pocked stretch of mud between the lines of death became, for a few magical, unbelievable hours, a sacred pitch. The game without enemies. There were no referees, no official scorekeepers, and certainly no clean uniforms. This was football in its purest form. It was a chaotic, joyous ballet of mud and laughter. A German private tackling a British corporal, only for both to tumble into the muck, roaring with laughter and helping each other up. A perfectly aimed shot being deflected by a shell crater. A cheer erupting from both sides when a goal was scored. For those few hours, there was no Germany, no Great Britain. There were no Tommies, no Fritzes. There were only forwards, defenders, and midfielders. Men united not by a flag, but by the simple, beautiful logic of the game. They were speaking the universal language of sport, a language that required no translation. In that muddy field, under a gray Flanders sky, these young men remembered who they were before the uniform. They were simply people. The score, often reported as a 3-2 victory for the Germans, was irrelevant. The real victory was the game itself, a profound, spontaneous act of shared humanity that defied the very purpose of their being there, an echo in the mud. But the sun, indifferent to miracles, continued its arc across the sky. As evening approached, the game ended. The final handshakes were exchanged. Men who had shared a laugh were now tasked once more with sharing death. The generals in their distant chateaus were furious. Orders were issued, forbidding any further fraternization. The war machine demanded its fuel of hatred, and a football match was a dangerous act of defiance. The Christmas Truce of 1914 was never repeated on such a scale, but it could not be erased. It lived on in the letters of soldiers, in whispered stories, in the collective memory of a generation lost to the mud. The football match in no man's land was more than just a game. It was a brief, beautiful rebellion against the insanity of war. It was proof that even in the deepest, darkest trenches of human conflict, our shared humanity is not a fragile thing to be broken, but a stubborn, resilient force, waiting for just a moment of peace or the bounce of a ball to remind us who we truly are. The story of the Christmas Truce football match is a powerful reminder that history is not just made by generals and politicians, but by the small, courageous acts of ordinary people. It teaches us that compassion can bridge even the widest of divides. If this story moved you and you want to explore more incredible moments of humanity from our shared past, then please consider supporting our channel. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these forgotten histories to light. Click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join our community of history lovers. Thank you for watching.